So today we have a very special edition of Data Shark with a very, very special guest, Anne Lipkin. Thank you so much for taking time to join me here on the podcast. We have exciting things to talk about, but I would love to start with an introduction.
Okay. I mean, thank you very much, though my life I don't think is really that interesting.
Don't sell yourself so
I am-
short. It is interesting.
I'm a former Gartner analyst, and I spent 10 years at Gartner that I will never get back, mostly in the data and analytics space. And there was a period of time when I actually was the manager of the research agenda, and so responsible for the people who produced, I think, 15 or 16 Magic Quadrants.
Incredible. So that's a great segue to our main topic during this episode, and that's actually the Gartner Magic Quadrant for ABI, Analytics and Business Intelligence. Full disclosure, I'm part of a company called Pyramid Analytics, for those who don't know, and we are a vendor in the ABI market. We're also participants in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And I wanted to chat with you today about the new Gartner MQ, the 2024. Pyramid was ranked number 2 from a visionary perspective, all around between the 20-something vendors in there. And we're scratching the edge of the quadrant from an execution standpoint. How does Gartner rank vendors?
So Gartner ranks vendors on 2 axes. The first axis, the vertical axis, is ability to execute. In other words, how well are you serving the market that you're in today? And for each market, they give a market definition that defines who's in it from a user perspective and what their needs are. The horizontal axis is called completeness of vision. And that really measures the ability of a vendor not only to serve the market today, but to anticipate what the market needs are going to be in order to be able to serve it in the future. And it's really important to remember with respect to Magic Quadrants that what they are looking at is not an evaluation of a product per se, but rather an evaluation of a company. So they're looking to understand how well the company, Pyramid, or any of your competitors can serve the market. That means sell your product, market your product, and then service your product after you've taken people's money in order to fulfill what the market needs are. So it's important to remember that with a Magic Quadrant, they're not only looking at how good the product is, but they're looking at how good your customer support is, how well you sell your product, how responsive you are to customer needs in pricing, and so on and so forth.
Incredible. So now that we understand a little bit more how Gartner view vendors in the MQ, why is it important? If I'm, an enterprise company and I want to search for new vendors, is that the place to go to?
Well, it's one of the places to go to, though any Gartner analyst will tell you that Magic Quadrants are widely misused. In other words, end user customers will look at a Magic Quadrant graphic and they'll see 4 or 5 companies in the leaders quadrant, and they will send out an RFI to those 4 or 5 companies, and they'll ignore everybody else, even though there might be another company somewhere else in the quadrant that would suit their needs better. The issue of Magic Quadrant misuse is actually a real sore point for Gartner. But you have to remember, Gartner is the Leviathan in this space. They are the world's largest research and advisory firm on technology issues. And somewhere between 75 and 80% of their customers are end user customers. In other words, real companies using real technology to solve real business problems who are calling them up and asking them for advice on what technologies to deploy, what to buy, how to use them, and so on and so forth. So it's important because it is, I think, the last research numbers I saw said that 85% of purchasing decisions include consultation of a magic quadrant in the process.
So it's basically the Bible. You don't do any.
Yeah, fundamentally, it's the word Moses bringing the tablets down from Sinai, basically.
Well, it's luckily we're Jewish. So, so the Magic Quadrant comes with another research piece, which is called the critical capabilities. This is basically Gartner tracking 4 use cases. This year, Pyramid has been ranked number 1 for all 4 use cases. I don't know if in the history of all histories of MQs, there was ever a single vendor that dominated all use cases or got the highest ranking in that degree in the critical capabilities. But when you explain how to think about the MQ, how does it relate to the critical capabilities?
Well, and that's a very good point, Omri. And actually, just in terms of what you said before, I believe that there has been a clean sweep of the number 1 position in other Magic Quadrants. I don't believe, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't believe it's ever happened in the analytics and business intelligence platforms, MQ. So kudos to you guys. You are a first, I think, in making a clean sweep of the number 1 spot in all of the use cases. The critical capabilities report is different from the Magic Quadrant in that it actually does evaluate the fitness of a particular tool. So it's focused on the product where the Magic Quadrant is focused on the vendor. And the reason that they did that was because Gartner used to produce only Magic Quadrants. And every time they did that, people would call up and say, yeah, but hey, what do I need to think about in terms of my specific particular needs? So what they did was they created a framework that said we're going to have a number of common use cases. 80% of the people that we talk to are end user customers. They're telling us what they're doing. They're telling us what they're trying to accomplish. So we'll come up with 4 or 5, or in some cases 3 use cases. And then we will establish what are the critical capabilities, what is the critical functionality that a tool needs to have in order to service this market. And we'll basically assign different weights to each capability in each use case, and we'll score the capabilities and then come up with a weighted average, which is the use case score. So what the critical capabilities tells you is this product well suited for my particular use case for the problem that I am trying to solve? And so it is a good companion to the MQ because on the one hand, the MQ is focused on the company and not on the product. And the critical capabilities is focused on the product in specific common use cases that Gartner sees with its customers.
So the combination of both reports positions Pyramid in a very unique position. But putting Pyramid as a vendor aside for a second, we're in the visionary quadrant. If I'm a new buyer and I want to explore new vendors, what's the visionary quadrant for?
The visionary quadrant, so remember that the Magic Quadrant has 2 axes. It has an ability to execute axis, and it has a completeness of vision axis. So particularly in a space like ABI, where you have some entrenched vendors who are very, very large with incredible resources, okay? Like Microsoft, like Salesforce with Tableau, like Google with Looker. Gartner wants to make sure that that people are seeing the capabilities of companies that might be smaller than a Microsoft or smaller than a Google and not have quite the resources, but who actually have a vision for the market which is very complete and very useful in that market. So for those organizations who only want to deal with very big companies, then you have plenty to choose from. But there are companies that are smaller, but and don't have the resources to execute at quite the same level. They don't have the same number of customers and so on and so forth. But they do have a vision for the market, which is unique and which actually fulfills the market needs, in some cases better. There are magic quadrants where the visionaries are much farther to the right than the leaders, because the leaders execute well, but their vision is not quite as good.
Interesting. So maybe that kind of leads to my next question. If I'm a customer who's looking to buy a new technology from the ABI market, people tend to exclusively look at the graphics, right? They look at the dot position, this is what I want to do, and I'm heading on my journey. But there is a document that has lots of description of the technology, the challenges, the strengths, the real valuation of where the vendor is. Is that something that people are missing on?
Yes, and as I said before, Gartner complains incessantly that people misuse magic quadrants in their product evaluations. The write-ups are actually more important than the graphic itself, because the write-ups tell you way more about the product and about the company. And if you don't go into that detail for the vendors that you've chosen to look at, you're actually missing quite a bit of nuance, because not only does Gartner talk about the company itself, but they talk about what its strengths are, what advantages does this company bring to the market, and what are its weaknesses? Where are the places that it needs to improve? Both of those things are very important. So looking at the graphic is great, but just looking at the graphic isn't, in my mind, sufficient. And I will tell you that, when I was responsible for Magic Quadrants, we had way more arguments with vendors over the wording of the write-up than we ever did on the dot position. Dot positions were kind of fixed, because what they do essentially is they will score you on a collection of criteria, and they publish what those criteria are. And then they feed everything into an algorithm that essentially establishes the outer boundaries of the scatter plot, and then places the dots relative to one another based on how they did in the criteria. So there's not a lot to argue with about dot position, but boy, can you have some really good arguments with people about how you describe their strengths, and particularly how you describe their challenges.
No, that makes total sense. And we're always challenging Gartner on what they write about us, specifically on evaluating the technology and the areas that, the scope of what we deliver. I think that Pyramid offers quite an interesting broad spectrum of capabilities. But I want to touch on a new topic kind of as a segue to that, and that's generative BI.
God, you want to talk about Gen AI.
Unbelievable. Again,
everybody wants to talk about Gen AI and nobody wants to talk about anything else, which is really kind of disturbing. It's the flavor of the month.
So first of all, it is. Everybody wants to talk about Gen AI. I'll force you to talk about Gen BI.
Okay, you can ask me to talk about Gen BI, but before that, I want to say one thing, which is that Gen AI is only one component of the AI puzzle. And you can use Gen AI very well in a product, but if you're only using Gen AI and you're only concentrating on that component, then you're missing out on a lot. And if I were you at Pyramid, I would make sure I didn't sell myself short by just focusing on Gen AI, because you guys do so much great stuff and have done for many, many years with artificial intelligence and machine learning in the product to actually accomplish things that users need to accomplish.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I do want to hear your point of view on the AI story in general in the ABI market. Obviously, Gartner has lots of opinions around AI and how it's going to change this industry or evolve the industry or revolutionize the industry. And I'm actually curious on, do you think this is the next revolution, or we're just, it's an evolution of where we were in the last few years and we're just continuing to improve?
Because revolutions are generally not very good, for the human race. But I think in this case, we have to bow to the inevitable and realize that the capabilities of artificial intelligence have been useful, and where they're exploited properly have done great things. I think what happens with generative AI is that it becomes much, much more accessible to everybody, to two guys with their dog in a garage, and the potential for benefit is phenomenal. The potential for misuse is at least as large. And so it's going to be very, very interesting times. I think that in the context of the data and analytics market, this is particularly interesting because the one thing that Gartner is beating the drum on, and you will hear this from anybody and everybody, is that AI, Gen AI, machine learning, all of those things are worthless unless you have really, really high quality data. Because if you're unleashing one of these, one of these weapons on data that is not very good, you're going to come out with the wrong answer, and that has the potential to be really, really bad.
The term garbage in, garbage out was never so true.
No, the term garbage in, garbage out actually, it's worse than that. It's garbage in, poison out.
Right.
Because what comes out can actually be incredibly destructive if what goes in isn't high quality. From a pyramid perspective, one of the things that I'd be playing on if I were running your marketing team is the whole idea that for years and years and years, we have focused on data quality and making sure that the data that's analyzed is high quality data. And so that feeds in very, very nicely to the whole artificial intelligence, machine learning story, because we had the foresight, or you had the foresight. I have to remind myself that I'm not running your marketing department, but you have the foresight to say that we have always known that the quality of the data is incredibly important, and the fact that it's important now is just more of the same. It's not something new for us that we need to do things to address. We're already doing that stuff.
So I want to go back to the personas, and you mentioned, that there's going to be more access to more data, potentially by more people or more personas. One of the things that the chat GPT of the world allowed people that have no technical background or are computer phobic to start talking to the internet. And in a way, Gen BI does the same, just on companies' data. And our perception is that Gen BI will pull in multiple personas that will typically have, abandoned those systems to start using analytics.
I think you're probably right, because that is the big deal with the generative AI thing, is the fact that it is accessible to anyone with a microphone, essentially. So people who were intimidated by spreadsheets and by data, I mean, that's the reason that we developed charts and visuals, right? Is because people were intimidated by spreadsheets and large blocks of numbers. And generative AI takes it one step further, so that anybody, essentially with no technical knowledge at all, could ask questions and get answers. Now, what the Gen BI stuff does is it actually allows you as a business person to ask questions about what's going on in your own company and to get answers based on your own data. So it provides a level of accessibility that we haven't previously seen. And that I think is going to make the holy grail of the data-driven enterprise actually much more accessible, because now everybody's going to be able to use the data and everybody's going to be able to see the outcomes.
I couldn't agree more. And listen, this has been incredibly informative, and I hope that our listeners will appreciate the way Gartner allows them to learn more about the vendors in the space, and they need to choose Pyramid eventually.
No, absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome.